Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben and with me as always is...
My name is Inigo Montoya.
You are definitely my buttercup.
My name is Jim, and this week we watched The Princess Bride.
Movie I picked, so it is my turn for the synopsis, so let's go. The Princess Bride is a fairy tale adventure filled with romance, humour and swashbuckling action. The story begins with a grandfather reading the tale to his sick grandson, who's sceptical about the story at first but soon becomes captivated by it. The story involves Buttercup, a young woman who lives in the country of Florin, who falls in love with her farmhand Wesley, but he leaves to seek his fortune. Tragically, Buttercup later receives word that Wesley has been killed by the notorious Dread Pirate Roberts. Heartbroken, she agrees to marry the pompous Prince Humperdinck, though she does not love him. Unbeknownst to Buttercup, Wesley is alive and has assumed the identity of the Dread Pirate Roberts, and he soon learns of the engagement and secretly plots to rescue her. Meanwhile, Buttercup is kidnapped by a group of criminals. Vizzini, a genius with a penchant for intricate plans, Fezzik, a strong giant with a heart of gold, and Inigo Montoya, a skilled swordsman seeking revenge against a six-fingered man. Wesley, as Roberts, tracks them down in an epic chase and a battle of wits and shoes. The story unfolds, Buttercup's captors reveal their motivations, and Wesley and Buttercup's love is reunited. Along the way, Inigo gets his chance at revenge, Fezzik shows his loyalty, and Prince Humperdinck's sinister plot for war is revealed.
That is indeed what happens.
It's a surprisingly complex movie as far as plot goes.
We'll definitely talk about that. That's some of my biggest thoughts on the film. But what are some of the facts or the contexts of production, if we were to use, some filmmaking language there?
Yeah, released in the best year, 1987. Directed by Rob Reiner. This is Spinal Tap, A Few Good Men, Stand By Me. Written by William Goldman. Now, William Goldman wrote the book as well. So, best guy to write the script, I suppose. Starring Cary Elwes, Mandy Patinkin, Chris Sarandon, Christopher Guest, Wallace Shawn, Andre the Giant, Robin Wright, Peter Falk, and Billy Crystal are also uncredited in the Wikipedia, but I have added them. Fred Savage. Budget of $16 million, box office of $30.9 million.
So what was it that caused you to choose this film? Obviously, I know it was a mystery person said, hey, you really got to do Princess Bride. But then when we were talking about it, you said, I'm super familiar with it. Like, what's your journey with the movie?
I do love this film because even as a younger person, this film just presents itself as pure adventure. It's modern fairy tale. It's something that is just so easy to be kind of wrapped up in the adventure it presents that it's just an enjoyable watch. It's easy to forget anything else that's going on. I think I'm much more into the first half of the film as an adult. I think that's the more iconic kind of set of sequences and the most adventurous part of it. But even the second half provides such good humor and catharsis. It kind of presents its own enjoyable kind of things. I'm also, I think I've mentioned it before, a massive wrestling fan, and Andre the Giant is a massive part of wrestling history, and watching him kind of present this role, which was so different to anything he'd kind of been able to put out there in the world before, is just a really enjoyable experience as well. I think, we can get to it later, but I think that the way he does his acting in this film is kind of pure. Like, he's not an actor, but it's the choices he makes are innocent and pure as far as the direction of his character and the way he delivers things. But yeah, no, it's just one of those things that I've always found this movie enjoyable. And I think that's the key, right? Like, it's eminently enjoyable. There's nothing in here that drags it down too much. The plot is convoluted, but I think that is a side effect of the style of story they're telling. And I actually think there's a very, very good reason for it. And again, we can get into that a little bit later. But tell me, Jim, what do you think of The Princess Bride?
Yeah, my journey with the film is a bit different to yours. I only ever watched snippets of it as a child. I never had seen the whole thing. It was just the sort of movie where someone else would be watching it and I would watch like a scene, or it'd be on TV and I'd catch like the end. All of this stuff is the worst way to view a film, can I just say? But again, you're a child. There's not a lot you can really do about that. That's some movies. That's how it is. And for me, that was Princess Bride. So I didn't actually watch it properly for the first time until I was probably in my late teens. At which point, I at that time struggled a little bit with it because there was stuff that I loved and then there was stuff that I didn't. So, and then I really only watched it once, sort of thought, oh, that was that. And then it was only as an adult, many years later, that I came to rewatch it, appreciate it, understand its place in cinema history, and honestly, not just appreciate it, but really enjoy it. Like, I really enjoy it now. And I have a real soft spot for The Princess Bride. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. I came to the film gradually over years. I didn't understand, I suppose, why it was so magical for a lot of people until a bit later. But sometimes I think, even though this film is, you could say it's for younger audiences, it's this fairy tale, I didn't really appreciate all of that until I was older. So that's an interesting kind of dynamic
I
sometimes.
think it's very cross generational. Like, yes,
Mm.
there is the simplistic adventure of the film that people can go, oh, that was really fun. But even like when rewatching it, listening to dialogue, there are dialogue tricks, there are dialogue conversational kind of hoops that this runs through. Like, it's almost like Monty Python esque and anachronistic in places, and the flow of the dialogue is quite, especially between like Fezzik and Inigo. Like their kind of repertoire, their back and forth is quite enjoyable. And as a kid, I don't think you'd get all the nuance of the flow of that language and the use of words and things like that. So yeah, it's one of those things that I think has a little bit for most age groups. And because I mean, nothing in there is also dramatically bad except for a little bit of violence, maybe that for the younger generation.
Yeah, it's the other thing is, I think structurally as well, I think I'm like you in what you were alluding to, where the strongest part of the movie for me, the part that I enjoy the most, is really kind of the opening third and the rescue of Buttercup, and then Buttercup and Wesley on the run from Humperdinck. And that period of the movie sort of ends once Humperdinck catches them. And then the movie changes and it alters pace completely. And much as I really enjoy the film, there's always a part of me when that part of the movie comes up, I go, what if we had just a whole chase movie, of
Yeah.
Humperdinck chasing them, and we could actually see, because there'd be something really interesting there from a character perspective of these two characters who are in love but have been apart and have become different people, and then watching them actually, you know, reconnect through the journey and maybe realize that their relationship perhaps isn't perfect because they have changed a bit. So, and will they come out stronger, will they not? But now I'm doing something like rewriting the movie, which is kind of a travesty because it's a classic, I know that, but it is just something that comes to my mind every time I view the film.
There's a definite disconnect. It almost feels like the movie restarts in the second half with
Yes.
characters we're familiar with, but restarts. And there's actually a really solid explanation for why it feels that way in its production and its making of. So this is based on a book. Now, I'm going to read the full title of the book because I think it actually helps me explain the reasoning. The Princess Bride, S. Morgan's classic tale of true love and high adventure, the good parts version. The whole conceit of the book, which is reflected in the movie, is it starts with a man who has nothing to do with the story of The Princess Bride talking about how much he loved the movie, having his own family, and then telling his son to read the book. And his son doesn't, and he's a bit of an absent father, and he comes in and out, and he finally comes home and he asks his wife, like, why is he not reading this book? It's such a good book. I loved it as a kid, all this sort of stuff. And then eventually he picks up the book and starts reading it and realizes it's practically unreadable. And it's because his dad used to read him the book, but skip the boring parts. He edited it as he read it to him as a kid. In the book of The Princess Bride, the character I'm talking about re-edits the book and reads it to his son. So it's only the best bits. which is exactly what's kind of presented in this movie without being presented. In the grandfather character reading to Fred Savage, I've imagined it ever since I learnt that he's just reading the cool bits to his son. There's no way he can read him a whole book in a day, but he can read him just the adventurous and fun parts. He can miss the genealogy, he can miss the songs, he can miss the outlandish descriptions, he can miss the politics, because that's not what the kid's interested in. He just skips to the adventurous parts. And I think that's kind of what is a little bit represented, rather on purpose or not, in this film. When he's captured, it cuts a chunk out of how everybody gets to where they're going and just gets to the next interesting part, which is the next interesting part of the adventure. And I think I've enjoyed the movie even more since I've started thinking about it this way, of this, like, this grandfather editing this story on the fly to make it more interesting to his grandson.
Yeah, the framing device is something that is interesting because there's definitely a read of the film where you say it doesn't need to be there, but it's something where, again, over time, I've come to appreciate the framing device more and more and more and more. And then eventually, of course, you realize it's kind of the heart of the whole film. Like, without the framing device, it would actually definitely be missing something. It's a necessary part of telling this particular version of the tale, particularly when we think of the tone of the film and some of, I guess, what you'd call the anachronisms of the film, the fact that we're in this fictional, medieval fairy tale kingdom, but half the people have American accents and speak in a very contemporary way. And when you have the framing device there, you can kind of read that as, well, the grandfather is adapting things, as you say,
Yeah.
on the fly. And I think that conceit works then quite well for the actual movie. But at the same time, there is that idea that the journey of the film does stop, and we're now very stationary and static for the last kind of, I guess, half of the film. So still some really fun stuff there, though.
Oh, yeah.
And the last half has like, the whole idea that he's paralyzed is wonderful when he's trying to sort of return to full movement, and there's a lot of great sight gags there where you sort of also think, again, a bold performance from Carrie Elwes, because the first half of the movie he plays this super competent, swashbuckling Errol Flynn style hero, and then in the second half of the movie he's incapacitated but still has all of that swagger, and this is sort of like high comedy now, and he's doing that very well at the same time. And we've already talked about a film of his, Men in Tights, that he would then come to do later, but there is a definite arrow from his performance in Princess Bride to Men in Tights. It's just Princess Bride's a little bit more straight, if you like.
Watching that stare he does when he's looking at somebody he thinks is ridiculous or wrong in this movie definitely gives you that feeling from Robin Hood Men in Tights, of just like that kind of like that swaggery stare. Characters in this movie, there are many who are insanely iconic. I think the three that obviously come to mind are our three original villains in Fezzik, Vicini, and Inigo. Both all played with just such fun and imagination, and ultimately become the most memorable characters in this film. So I'll start with Vicini, Wallace Shawn. Inconceivable.
Yes,
Like that.
I have heard you say that apart from the last 25 years. Do you know what I mean? Like, something
I quote
will
it
happen.
Everyday Life.
It's like, and Ben will just be inconceivable. Like, he literally just says it all the time.
But like, it was interesting. Like, I did a little bit of reading about, like, after this film and how it was received and things like that. Apparently, haunted might be too strong a word, but the character of Vicini kind of followed Wallace Shawn for the rest of his life. And in a very simple way of, like, whenever something happened, like, say he dropped his keys, if he was in public, he would inevitably hear someone scream inconceivable at him. Like, it just followed him forever, which is amazing. And,
Can I just say on that, I picked up something this time which I couldn't believe I'd never picked up on any other rewatch, and I was almost on the floor laughing. Like, and it was Inigo, as they're looking over the cliff, saying, "You keep saying that word. I don't think it means what you think it means."
You've never
love it.
heard that before? Oh yeah.
I don't know why, but I'd always missed that line. And then
Yeah.
when he said it, I just lost it because I was like, that's so great.
He keeps using this word, so I do not think it means what you think it means. Yeah, so I mean, like, yeah, it was like that. And then you've got the character of Inigo Montoya, played by Mandy Patinkin. And hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die. People use that in their everyday life as well as just like a meme or a reference. And then you've just got, you know, Fezzik. And Fezzik is this kind of really lovable giant, this thing with a heart of gold who kind of is strong, but that's not what he thinks he is. Like he knows he's strong and powerful, but he thinks of himself as more of just a gentle giant. And him jogging people's memories is very funny to me and very slapsticky. And I just found it wonderful. Those three characters, even though they're together for such a short amount of time as a trio, are just inseparable in my head. And are played perfectly by each one of their individual actors.
It's almost sort of surprising in a way that, like Inigo and Fezzik didn't get some kind of follow up. Like that duo on their own, I think there's a lot of potential there for that duo to have further adventures and to sort of go further, I guess, in the story, whether it be in a spin-off or a series or a film or a book or something, that follows those two characters.
Well, I mean, films and stuff, if you were going to use Andre the Giant, would have been impossible. The poor fella at this stage in his life was in constant pain. Like, he had a genetic condition where he kind of constantly grew. Like, they used to call it like giantism, but it actually has a scientific name. And he constantly grew. And his whole life, he was an attraction. An attraction is the word, too. Like, people came to see him because he was big. He was wrestling because he was big. And he had constant joint pain, back pain. He was a legendary drunk because he self-medicated and all those sort of things. And at this point in his life was towards the end of all of that. And I was reading bits and pieces behind the scenes, and everyone's like, yeah, we loved Andre, we love Andre. But someone was, I think it was Mandy Patinkin, did an interview, and he was explaining that he just loved being on set because he was one of the guys. He wasn't an attraction on set. No one was coming up to him because he was Andre the Giant. They were just hanging out with him because he was Andre and he was part of the film. And even Andre, in after interviews, really glowingly spoke about his experience on the film. As I said, because he didn't feel like like a sideshow. He felt like he was part of it. And I think that really shows in the film, like those moments where the camera kind of comes close to Fezzik and just shows his face, doesn't show the enormity of the human he is, and he says those funny little lines, or he says those nice little warming lines. I think he really is the heart and soul of the film, for as little as he actually kind of commands of the screen, despite his immense size.
That definitely speaks to some of the intoxicating nature of being in either a theater production or on a film set, is that idea of working towards the common goal and everything else falling away, It's funny that is why a lot of people get into that industry, is because that idea of the company, the players, the team, if you like, coming together and working single-mindedly on a product that, and then of course that then disbands and people go their separate ways. But that is one of the big things that keeps people coming back to those sort of creative arts, is that idea of team and that idea of common goal, and how intoxicating that can be.
My last anecdote for Andre the Giant was from Robin Wright. And basically, she was saying he was a gentleman and all these sort of things. And there's a scene where he's supposed to catch her, but he just couldn't. He was so broken. They had to lower her down very gently. And that's why you get that kind of ethereal shot at the end. But they were shooting the forest scenes. And apparently, she didn't have a jacket and it was really, really cold. And she was kind of shivering. And Andre didn't say anything. He just walked up behind her and put his hand on her head like a beanie. And it covered her whole head. And he always ran super hot, and it kept her warm. And he just sat there and he was talking to people and had a hand on her head, keeping her warm. And his hands were like massive fry pans. Yes. So he's just like gently keeping her warm with his body warmth by just placing his hand on his head. So, I mean, it just explains that obviously he knew what he was, and he knew how big he was and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, Andre the Giant Man. But I also want to say, just lastly, I think the character of Inigo Montoya may be one of my favorite characters in fiction. Just because of the journey they kind of present, right? You don't see the start of the journey where he talks about how he was lost and he was broken and he was rescued by Vicini. You see him at his midpoint first, where he's kind of fully in his power. He's the best swordsman in the world, and then he's not the best swordsman in the world. And then he's a drunk again, and then he finally gets his revenge. And his story is actually what provides the release, the catharsis in this film. Like, his ending actually gives us, I think, more closure than any other part of this film. And his kind of representation and presentation by Mandy Patinkin is just so fun and so enjoyable and has such an energy to it that, yeah, he's definitely one of my favorite characters in fiction.
That's a hard one to top, and I've kind of got to agree with that. It's always a strong element of this particular film, is his portrayal. Also, his final duel scene is amazing in the sense that it all hooks into that few lines of dialogue, his catchphrase, if you like, where he is basically stating his mission statement, and that is what is keeping him in the fight and keeping him, facing his adversary. And in a weird way, that scene is a scene that kind of feels in some ways like it's from a different movie because that particular
feels like it's
scene,
the end of a trilogy or something.
Yeah, all of a sudden it's very epic. It's pretty dark. There's blood hits as they're actually stabbing each other, something more like we'd see in like The Duelist or something like, and it's sort of a little bit violent. That's probably the only scene where you would sort of say, kids, I don't know, but aside from that, it's fairly friendly, and silly a lot of the times, but then you've got this one sequence where it's just that little bit more intense. So, but great sequence, like really, and obviously just before that, you obviously then also have the fantastic moment where he finally finds the six-fingered man, and the six-fingered man just runs down the hall, just like bolts.
Well,
and
he does dispatch like 5 soldiers without effort, and then the guy's just looking at him. He's like, no.
Yeah, but like that's a great moment as well. It's a great moment of comedy and cowardice, and also the idea that maybe this adversary who he's built up in his mind isn't even as good as he thinks he is, that kind of thing, because he was a kid at the time.
He was just 11. Like,
exactly. So really interesting, particular part of the film. In terms of how this film looks and how this film is shot, I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff there as well, in the sense that it's quite conventional in its camera angles, in the way that it's photographed. And I don't actually say that in a negative sense at all. It is kind of charming in that way. It's not an overly flashy film. It's a film that has a real standard kind of simple kind of storytelling, and even in the costumes and that sort of thing, that it's not too overwrought. Really functionally, our hero just wears that black outfit with the boots and the sword through the whole film. And of course, they didn't have a lot of money comparatively, so you can kind of see that. But I don't mind when something is simple if the story that they're telling is really, really strong. And obviously, there are certain places where they spent a bit more money, like their fire swamp, I think they
Fire
call
Swamp,
it. So,
yeah.
and you can clearly see, we got some real production design here. This would have cost us a bit. A lot of the other time we're in nature in the UK, and actually just seeing these sort of old castles or these hillsides and countrysides, and there's a certain charm to that aesthetic as well.
It's simply staged. Like, it's like, if you were to explain it like a theater production, like, it's all about the players and the script rather than it is necessarily about the staging. I mean, obviously that's taking it to the extreme. There's obviously staging in this film, and wonderful countryside, and you're right, the 2 sets are really just the fire swamp and the dungeon. They would be the 2 massive bits of construction and set design that they did. Everything else was based either a real world location, and they've dressed it up and things like that, and the ships probably. But yeah, it allows the rest of the movie, in a strange way, I hadn't thought about it, to breathe. You're not distracted. You're not, Buttercup, I think, has the most elaborate costumes in this, and one of those is in a dream. And you get this kind of simply presented film where you get to just kind of enjoy the ingredients.
You mentioned Buttercup, and there's something that I really wanted to talk about as well, which is I love any time that you see an actor who is, or actress who is super established and we're used to seeing on the screens over decades. I love it if you can identify the first time we
Yeah.
see them. They used to do it in this really nice way where they would put a title card up, and it's in this film which says, and introducing
Juicing.
so and so. They don't tend to do it as much anymore, and that's a bit of a shame in my opinion, because it's lovely to actually see on screen when this person arrived, if you like, and when they sort of appeared. And also, first films are tough because obviously the actor or the actress is learning the craft and working it all out and also having to deliver a good performance. And sometimes in a film like this, where the film has become so iconic, a lot of actors will kind of want to bury their first movie
Yeah.
because they're still learning the ropes and working it out. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you get, a Star Wars Attack of the Clones and it's Hayden Christensen and it's like, this is it. This is my introduction. This is where I'm working it out and everybody's going to see it. And this is that for Robin Wright. And I think she does an excellent job in this movie. It's a strong character. It's a difficult character to make interesting, to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest. And I actually think she does a really nice job. And she's got to be only like, I don't know, 20, 21, something like that at the time of filming. And seeing that this was her first movie is cool, because then we would see her again for, like I said, to this day, decades of cinema and television on our screens. So
I think what she does fantastically is, yeah, she's not a massive like screen presence on the film, but every time she interacts with a different character, her responses are tailored, right? Like her facial expressions. Like you even see it when she finally gets to kind of the second time she gets to interact with Fezzik, for example. There's warmth between them. Like she sees him immediately as what he is in this warm character. And she may have had that experience beforehand on the ship and stuff and seeing the true him. But even like there's a scene where they've just been married, but they haven't because she didn't say I do, and she's been walked back to her room by the king and queen. And the king is this doddery old addled man who seems pretty sweet and lovely, who doesn't get what's going on. And she's saying this kind of really kind of
pretty
sad
dark.
thing.
It's pretty
She's saying,
dark.
hey, when I get back to my room, this is over. I'm going to end it. And he's like, oh, isn't that lovely? And she kind of kisses him on the cheek, and he's so excited that he got a kiss from a beautiful princess. But she kind of like, she recognizes his sweetness and his lack of role in this situation, and he's just a set dressing to all extents and purposes to his son. And it's a lovely way for her character to react. It's this kind of like, you sweet, sweet idiot. You don't get it. And that's fine. You're lovely. And she gives him a little peck on the cheek goodbye. And I think that interaction almost sums up her character perfectly. Like she's very aware of her station and her place and her surroundings and her role in things as a character. And it's fun. It's enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. So, is there anything, and I'm gonna go there. Is there anything about this film you don't like? Anything that like you go, I don't like that part, and yeah, I get it. It's iconic. It's a classic. All these things, I don't like that bit.
There's two bits I'm not a huge fan of, and it's probably just because it has aged. And that is the two bits of creature works in this film. There's the shrieking
the
eels.
the rodents of unusual size.
It's silly. It's silly for unnecessarily being silly in a strange way. But yeah, those two things, like he's fighting, definitely not a moving thing. Like it was thrown at him off screen and he's kind of doing that. But like as far as like the crux of the film, yeah, that restart in that second half is slow. Like it takes us a little bit to get where we want to go. And yeah, it's probably very nitpicky, but those would be the things, right? Like
Yeah.
everything else, I think, is carried so well by just the people in the scenes or the acting or the writing that you kind of either don't see a problem with it or you just gloss over it so quickly.
Yeah, nice. Yeah,
It's a solid 9 out of 10 film for me.
yeah.
Like,
I have, like, honestly, the things about it that I might, I guess, bump on are so minor that they aren't worth mentioning. However, I would say, yeah, I think there's definitely something in that section where we do the reset, and we've both talked about
yeah,
that. and I would certainly agree with that. So there's something around that section of the film. And then the other weird thing for me, the only thing that I find odd is that we have from Vicini this reference to Australia. Like, what? We have this fictional kingdom of, Florin. We're in this fairy tale setting, and then suddenly they're like, Australia.
Well, another country is mentioned as well, and
Is
that
it? What
is
country is that?
Greenland, and that's where
Right.
he found Fezzik. So I've always pictured it as it's a fake kingdom in a real world, and in universe, Australia would be the furthest place away that they could think of.
Yeah, right.
And it would
It's
be
just,
criminals and pirates there, like the Dread Pirate Roberts. But yeah, it is a bit jarring.
it was just funny. Like, it's not actually a criticism. It's not worth mentioning. It's just that maybe it's because we live there, but every time I hear them, like, I'm in this fantasy world, and then it's like, Australia. What?
Well, to be fair, the two places that are real that are mentioned in this movie are both mentioned by Vicini. Like, he mentions Greenland and he mentions Australia, so it's almost him braggadociously kind of explaining he knows foreign places.
Yeah.
And they just happen to use two real world ones as if this is set on our Earth, just in a different time.
Yeah, nice.
We haven't brought it up, and I'm ashamed that we haven't brought it up. There is a scene in this film that's quite famous. Well, there's two. There's two scenes in this film quite famous, and they both occur in the second half. One of them is such a swing for the fence, and I don't know, it's very Monty Python-esque, and that's the wedding marriage.
Yeah.
Like, what a choice, right? They're like, we've got this scene, it's not interesting, we have to make it interesting, and someone's gone, I got this.
I'm so happy you brought that up, because I would have gotten off this cast and been like, how did we not talk about this?
Marriage! And it's just like, it's very Python, right? It's very like the only joke in this scene is that he has a speech impediment. And it comes from nowhere. There's no other humor like it in the film.
Yeah.
Like, it's so, it gets me every time.
It's also that scene, that wedding scene, is something that we would then see time and time again as well. The idea of this medieval situation where, we're trying to interrupt the wedding. You look forward to, again, Robin Hood Men in Tights, and we see a version of that scene, complete with speech impediment, mind you. And then we look at Shrek, a few years after that, we see another version of the same scene. Like, so it's kind of this
permeated.
It really did, and became this thing that we would see often. But what's the other one you wanted to talk about?
Miracle Max. So Wesley's been tortured and he's dead, or is he? He's only mostly dead. And they take him to Miracle Max, who used to be the miracle man for the king, but got let go because, his son took over and he lost his confidence. And we get this whole scene with Billy Crystal in full makeup and kind of wig and everything like that. And the only reason you really know it's him is by voice.
Is the voice, yeah.
Yeah, that's an unmistakable voice. And then we have this scene where, they hear his last words, which are true love, or is it to blade? Or, and you meet his wife, and you get this kind of just chaotic scene in the middle of this film. And it's even more chaotic when you learn that Billy Crystal just didn't remember his lines all the time. So he was making stuff up and interjecting, and they were kind of improvising a little bit. And you get this kind of little bit of magic in this film, that just in that little pocket of just Billy Crystal being Billy Crystal and really having fun disappearing into this kind of role that he obviously is borrowing on himself, even like in it, to kind of make it more memorable. But yeah, just, it's a chocolate coated pill to make it go down easier. Like all these sort of things. Like I think it's just a wonderful piece of character acting in such a small part.
What's funny about that scene for me is that, as I said, I'd only seen snippets of this movie. And the other film that I watched a bit as a kid and I was more familiar with was Neverending Story. Mm-hmm. And definitely somewhere along the line, my brain, combined and conflated these two. And for years, I thought Billy Crystal was in Neverending Story because there's kind of a character who's a little bit similar in Neverending
Yeah,
Story, who's this old man
at the
who
statues.
yeah, exactly. And then finally, like, years later, I watch Princess Bride and I'm like, oh, what? This scene is here? I
This is a
just got
completely different film.
I got so confused. So, but yes, that is obviously another iconic sequence as well. So, look, thanks so much for choosing The Princess Bride. I had a delightful time watching this movie once again, and I think as well it is something that I only get fonder of with age. Like it's not going backwards for me. I'm only enjoying this film more the older I get. So,
Look, yeah, I again enjoyed it, and look, it reaffirms a lifelong goal for me to be an old man telling a story to a kid and them really enjoying it.
mm,
That's a lifelong goal. Like, my grandfather did it to me, and I'd love to pass that kind of storytelling joy onto somebody else. And this movie kind of lets me live through that a little bit until then. But yeah, look, Princess Bride, man, 9 out of 10 for me. I don't often score films, but I'm very, very confident in scoring this as like a high film for me. Before we get on to whatever could be a great pick by Jim or a sad pick by Jim, because you never know what you're going to get, let me tell you where you can find us. Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures happens to be our name. It also happens to be what you can look up if you want to find us on Spotify, iTunes, or YouTube. Once you do find us in one of those three places, like, comment, subscribe. In your comment, tell us a movie you want us to watch. Tell us a movie that is your childhood favorite that you watch as an adult and still holds up, that we should add to our wheel. Because when we can't think of a movie, we spin a wheel, and every movie that's been suggested to us is on that wheel. So we could end up watching your film. If you want to follow us on social media, you can follow us at Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures on TikTok, or Jim_and_Ben on Instagram. Jim, lay it on us. What are we watching next week?
well, look, I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but
Oof, great way to
I
start.
I have to follow my heart, Ben. I have to follow
The
my heart.
worst.
I know my heart's the worst. And the thing is, I get into these moods where I must revisit something because it's time. I need to give it another go. I need to say, do I still feel that way about this piece of art? Do I reflect on it more fondly? And there is a film that, in a way, I don't want to watch again, but also, if I'm
Let's
going,
not do it. Let's skip it.
no, because if I'm gonna watch it again, I want to talk to you about it once I've done it. So
Put me out of
we're
my
gonna
misery.
we're gonna watch Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, that's a good one.
We're gonna do it because
Better than Attack of the
I
Clones.
this is something that over the last 6 months, just randomly, I will text Ben just out of the blue. Could be 3 a.m. in the morning. And I'll text him something that I think about Rise of Skywalker. And I know if you look back at these texts, half of them will be, that's great. And half of them will be, I hate that thing. Do you know what I mean? And I really do have a split personality with the movie. But at the same time, I have not actually watched it for quite some time. So I think it's time to go back
Our
to
first
watch
Star
it.
Wars movie, and we're starting with Rise of Skywalker.
No, we've done Jedi. Did you forget?
We did too. Oh, wow. I did forget. Wow.
What is the point of doing a podcast where you're going to hopefully learn about cinema if you forget the ones that we've done?
We've done almost a year of these, man. I'm an old man.
All right. Well, look, next week we're going to take the plunge for Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. And I think the thing that I'm going to enjoy the most is maybe coming back and chatting to you about how we feel about it,
I'm
because
keen. I'm super
there's
keen.
a lot going on with this movie. So we hope that you join us next week for Rise of Skywalker. Have a wonderful week, and we hope to see you then.
Have a good one. Watch many movies, including The Rise of Skywalker. Bye.